Going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NFL. I guess it's not a marathon matchup show anymore, but the NFL matchup show for Saturday and Sunday. I'm Dave Loughran at Loughy _D, Loughy _D on the Twitters and the social medias for all of you podcast listeners. Now, before I introduced my co-host today, I want to point out that if you're listening for Saturday's slate, we got you. If you're listening for Sunday's slate, we got you as well. We're not going to hit them on the same. We're going to split them up because the slates are the contests, I should say, are much larger for Saturday individually and Sunday individually. And then, of course, we'll have a bunch of showdown content for Monday's Arizona and LA game. So that's what we're going to do. We'll do Saturday slate. We'll split it up and then Sunday slate. So if it's Saturday night and you're watching this, we still got you. Jordan's going to timestamp this right afterwards. You'll know when the Sunday slate hits and you'll be in good shape. So now that that's out of the way, Matt Savoca at Draftaholic joining me for the first week of the postseason. Matt, we got through some monster slates to close out the year. And here we are, man. 5 games for Saturday, Sunday. What's good, brother?
I'm feeling great. It feels a little bit like an epilogue, right? No more marathon matchups, as you said, but I'm so happy to be here. So happy to be continuing through the playoffs with you guys. We got so much great content over at Awesemo.com and here on the channel, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it. Let's dig into this. There are some really good games here and some clunkers and some weather I'm excited to talk about too.
Yeah, I know. You know, there's a couple games actually where weather could play a little bit of a role here. Is the wind still expected to be bad in Tampa?
Yes, it is. We're expecting sustained winds around 20 miles per hour and some rain. That's exciting for Tom Brady and company.
I mean, it actually really benefits the Eagles. I still don't think they get out of this one alive, but it certainly benefits a team that wants to run the football 40 times a game.
It absolutely does it. And it just makes things more interesting. Like I want to see a playoff game that's down to the wire, and certainly the rain just adds to the variability of many things. We'll get into it with all the players. All the same players are still high probability, but I agree with you. The Eagles could keep this close.
No doubt. So Justin Geary said, second round of COVID, here we go. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but I think it's going to be mighty interesting when no star players land on the COVID list during the postseason, Matt.
Oh, gosh, here we go. All right, hold on. I didn't get my tinfoil hat.
Put it on, baby.
I might have it at some point.
I haven't been wrong yet about any of this stuff. Any of it. Go back. Check my track record, man. I've been pretty spot on. Even with the stuff that they're putting in as new protocol, I've been on that shit weeks ahead of time. So don't count me out. Don't doubt me quite yet, Matt. Watch. No one's going to hit. Nobody big's going to hit it. And if they do, they won't miss a game.
I'm interested to see. Here's what I will say. I want that from an entertainment product standpoint. That's what I want. I don't delve in as far into these things as you. I just I just hope they all play. That's what I'll say.
For sure. Look, I'm not trying to pull you into anything. I'm just saying,
I'm feeling a little
pulled. NFL's a money-making business, okay? Let me put it to you this way, and then we're going to jump into Vegas and Cincinnati. No, seriously, hear me out for a second. Chat, you can have some opinions about me. That's okay, but I'm just speaking facts. If they were that worried about this, would you still be allowing 75,000 fans in attendance unmasked?
I was listening to an ESPN podcast with the head of Harvard Medical, who's talking about how it has a lot to do with the amount of space that your breath has to escape. So when you're talking about 5, 6, 7, 8 stories in a giant dome even, then there's enough room for it to move. I am not a scientist. I am listening to a podcast and I'm speaking to you secondhanded, but that is my belief for why those aren't consistently big events.
Sure. I'm not even talking about COVID in general. I'm talking about it's a money-making business. That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
They want to make money, right? And you make money by putting the best players on the field and as many people as you can in attendance. That's all I'm saying, man. That's not really controversial if you think about it. But
Method Maiden Johnson says that's where you made a mistake listening to ESPN. Oh, man.
Everything's about money. Once we understand that everything's about money, everything starts to make sense. Anyway, none of this matters because we're going to have football this week, no matter what. So let's talk about it, Matt. We got 5 games to get into. Las Vegas and Cincinnati, second highest total on the slate, 48.5. Kind of an exciting game, right? Do you know when the last time Cincinnati won a playoff game was?
Oh man, last time they won? 2011, or is it way before that?
So that was 10 years ago, right? Try 30 years ago.
Get out of here, man. I thought that Steelers. Okay.
Yeah. 1991, they won a playoff game. And then the last playoff game, right? The one following that they lost. The last time they won a playoff game, they came in after that and they lost to the Oakland Raiders. So here we go, man. A rematch, 30 years in the making, Matt. It's going to be fun. And I gotta be honest with you. I think this game has some legitimate shootout vibes. I know it's not a 53-point total, but there's a lot to like about this, just in the sense that you've got Vegas at +5. Derek Carr has not been exactly impressive from a DFS standpoint, but he's got Waller back. Renfro has played extraordinarily well. Zay Jones has made a name for himself lately. I mean, they definitely have a couple of weapons, and you've got Josh Jacobs coming off a great game as well. So let's kick it off there. And by the way, before we do, happy to have you guys with us. I didn't mention that earlier, but love having you guys join us every single Thursday for the matchup show. It's been a really fun thing that we've done all season. So let's ride this out all the way to the end. If you haven't hit that thumbs up yet, go ahead and do so. Help us combat the YouTube overlords. I mean, shit, after what I said to open the show up, I don't know if this show will even be available in an hour, but if it is, we'd love to have you hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks one more time for getting us over 70,000 subs. You make this job fun. And if you want to join the channel, hit join down below, get the free super chats each month, the custom emojis, the badges, and we'll always prioritize your questions and your comments along with our premium Discord members. All right, Matt, let's kick it off. I want to talk about the passing game first with the Raiders here.
Sure. Oh man, Ross, 4152K. Is that really the game that Bo Jackson broke his hip? Damn that game.
Is it really?
That's the case. That's what he says in the chat. I can't confirm or deny that, but darn. Talk about a player you want to go back and have an injury-free career. Bo Jackson. My goodness. Anyway, let's talk about this Las Vegas passing.
Is he the one guy that if you could go back and see what his career would have looked like if he wasn't hurt, is he the one guy that it would be?
There are 3 for me. It's definitely him. It's Len Bias, if that counts, and Ken Griffey Jr.
Okay. Want to know who it is for me? Obviously, I agree with all of those, but a little off the board, Jamal Charles.
Oh, man.
Jamal Charles is one of the best running backs to ever play the game, has one of the highest yards per attempt ever, averaged over 5 per attempt for his entire career. Phenomenal. 2 ACL injuries. If he didn't injure his ACL, Jamal Charles is going to be in the conversation as, one of, if not arguably the best running back out there. That might sound controversial, right? But if his career was never derailed as it was, Jamal Charles, we'd be talking about him as one of the greatest ever to play the game.
And you know what's so fun too, as an analytics nerd? His entire career is in the quote unquote modern era. We have the per play efficiency metrics for him. He is the only player to have over 80 games played and average 3 or more fantasy points over expected per game. No one has the longevity to perform over expectation like Jamal Charles. We probably had other players, but we just didn't have their per play metrics like we have for him.
For sure. What do you want to do with the Raiders? Darren Waller targeted a lot last game. It's encouraging to see. Couldn't really do much with those opportunities. He was notably and understandably rusty, right? But still, 9 targets. You saw Foster Moreau on the field a lot as well. I think you start to see that dissipate a little bit in the playoffs. And then you've got somebody like Zay Jones. We can talk about Renfro, but Zay Jones at his price point, I honestly think he's just underpriced with the amount of opportunities he's had. I mean, his target share since week 12 has been really, really solid for this Raiders team.
Yeah, let's talk about this from a macro perspective for 1 second here. I think the Bengals have a really high chance of winning here, over 70% chance of winning in the way I'm looking at it. And so the Raiders at some point, I think, are going to be down and are going to be forced to pass, meaning I'm totally fine playing multiple pass catchers here. Even a contrarian stack with Derek Carr seems fine to me. Then you add on the fact that the Bengals are actually the worst defense in the playoffs in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, and they lean towards being a pass funnel, meaning it's easier to pass on them. So at that point, you're talking about 49 and a half points total, depending on where you're looking at it. I know it's not the highest total of the entire slate or the entire weekend, but I think this game actually ends up having the most points scored. I think it certainly has that ability, especially with the fact that both defenses are below average, especially for the playoffs, but for all NFL teams. I'm really thrilled to see Darren Waller getting 9 targets. Those 9 targets are actually the most looks that Darren Waller has seen since that week 1 19 target game against Baltimore in overtime to start the season. So at this point, I'm thrilled. If you're rusty and you're getting 9 targets, including 2 in the red zone, I can slough off the fact that you only caught 2 of those passes for 22 yards. 68 air yards is super healthy as well. So he's the player I'm trying to prioritize, but I know that gets difficult, especially if you're game stacking here. You're going to want a Jamar Chase or a T. Higgins or something like that. So I agree with you. Zay Jones looks really, really interesting at that 4,200 price point on DraftKings. His expected fantasy points, 13.3 DraftKings expected fantasy points. Unsurprisingly, top 8 at his position on the Saturday slate. So I know it feels kind of risky, but I think that is your value play in this Vegas Raiders passing game.
He has the same target share since week 12 as Hunter Renfro. Now, let's not ignore the fact that Darren Waller returns and will eat into that. I get that, but I also see this being a game where they have to throw. Like if you believe that Cincinnati's offense is as good as they've looked, or even close to even 75% as good as they've looked over the past several weeks, excluding week 18 where Joe Burrow sat. I mean, he's thrown for almost 1,000 yards in the last 2 games, right? I mean, he's putting up huge numbers. He has 300 plus passing yards in 4 of his last 5. They can move the football through the air, and they have Joe Mixon in the backfield. They're going to score some points. And with that being the case, look, I'm not saying Cincinnati's defense is some juggernaut, some brick wall defensively. I'm not saying their defensive line is great. What I am saying, though, is when you look at Josh Jacobs on the season compared to what he did against the Chargers, I'm taking what he's done on the season over what he's done against the Chargers, because literally Rex Burkhead is ripping off 140-yard games against the Chargers at this point. You know what I mean? So I think they will have to resort to the air, and I think there's going to be enough for everybody. I agree with you on Renfro, but just given the lack of value on the Saturday slate at running back, right, and the lack of really talented options, but more so Waller's great price point at tight end, I think Zay Jones and Waller are the 2 guys that I probably get to the easiest on this slate for the Raiders.
Yeah, you're not talking about an unplayable player in Josh Jacobs at all, but I do have him below players like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, really all of the main skill players in the Cincinnati passing game. And honestly, I think I probably prefer Tyler Boyd as well based on the game script I'm thinking of. I'm never going to say that you can't play a player who's going to have 20 to 25 total opportunities like we can project for Josh Jacobs, especially on a small slate, on a 2-game slate. Are you kidding me? That's fine. I just don't see the game script going that way. And we've already seen Jacobs over the last few weeks get a 30 opportunity game and barely crest double-digit fantasy points. So that's firmly in the range of outcomes as well.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly not saying not to play Josh Jacobs. Listen, there aren't a lot of good running backs on this slate. All of these teams, save for, and we'll see in the postseason, save for maybe the Patriots, who could split things with Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson and then get Brandon Bolden out there as your pass catching back. All of these 4 teams have a lead back that's going to play most of the snaps. Joe Mixon, Devin Singletary now is the clear lead back in Buffalo. And then, of course, Josh Jacobs. So I think he's viable. I'm saying that I don't think they're going to be able to just lean on the ground game. And I think they're going to need to throw. So I'm not as worried about the target share. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I honestly don't think Bryan Edwards is the craziest option either, right? If you're coming into a slate where he's almost minimum salary on a 2-gamer, and he's seen, look, 5, 3, 4, 2, and 5 targets over his last 5 games. Is that great? No. But if you could give me 4 or 5 targets from a guy at minimum salary, you might just have to take some of that.
Yeah, you're going to need something like that to win a large field tournament on a small slate. But honestly, I love using all of our tools every single week, but during the playoffs, I actually lean on the big board more often than I do in the main slates in the regular season. So Bryan Edwards, one of the great things about the big board is that the top overall players will get a rating near 100, and the players who are just large field contrarian picks will be all the way down at 0. It doesn't mean you can't play players who have a rating of 0. So the Edwards is the first player that we've talked about today with that rating of 0. What it really means is if you insert Edwards into your lineup, that's it in terms of contrarian needs in that roster, unless you're talking about trying to maybe take down $1 million. That is all you have to do. This is not a showdown slate where you've got to really think about being unique. There are enough players on a 2-game slate. So I agree with you, but you're still talking about the the receiver 4 on the Raiders, who are expected to lose this game. And, they do have an applied team total decently high here. They're expected to score 21.5 points. But it's not like Edwards is a player that if you said I have 0 of him, I'm going to say that makes no sense. Of course, that's fine.
Jordan, just as I said the other day that our chat is usually pretty great, you get this fucking asshole in here spamming that.
I know.
I shouldn't even pay attention to it, but yeah, what a piece of garbage. All right. Anyway, if you're listening in podcast form, forgive me for using that language, but if you saw what I'm talking about, you'd be like, oh, okay, he's totally justified in saying what he just did. Yeah, usually it's pretty good. I mean, like you can't win them all though, can't win them all. That
I guess this is the life we're going to live sometimes when our channel numbers keep growing, and that's what we're aiming to do here. And there's a lot of great people that join us, and it's worth it. But thank you, Jordan, honestly, is what I'll say. Getting that out.
That's Rich says deep thoughts by Loughy. You don't need deep thinking for that one, bro. With Cincinnati, they have so many good and talented players. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. And by the way, no real injury concerns in these games. Some of these guys are limited in practice. That doesn't mean anything going into the postseason. We'll get to the real questionables later on in the show. But with all of these guys, you could make a good argument for all of them because Boyd is cheap. Higgins is mid-range, but he has a monster ceiling. And then Jamar Chase is phenomenal as well. Ben Rossa made a good point on Tuesday saying that Jamar Chase's ceiling is a little bit less important on a 2-game slate. Like if you're choosing him over Diggs, because if he goes for 27 or 47, he's probably going to be in the optimal anyway. So it's an interesting point to make for sure. But there's a lot of good plays on this Cincinnati side. And Joe Burrow is one of them, man. With how he's played lately, it's tough to not want to get to some of him. The problem is, what do you do when he's so closely priced to Josh Allen?
I think, we'll get to that. I think Joe Burrow makes a lot more sense in the context of the game environment he's more likely to be in than Josh Allen. I'm not saying Josh Allen doesn't have the higher ceiling, but just to riff on what Ben was talking about there, you don't need the 99th percentile score from all of your players on a 2-game slate in order to take down tournaments. You're talking about needing a 67th to 75th percentile score from your high salary players, and then just having a few contrarian options hit value. So at that point, I think Joe Burrow makes a whole lot of sense. 6,800, there are players at different positions that I'm kind of prioritizing right in that salary tier. But you talk about the talent and the ceiling of both of these wide receivers in Cincinnati. The last two games that Joe Burrow played, Jamar Chase had 22 total targets, over 125 yards in each of those games, including that just insane 266-yard explosion in week 17. Won people a lot of money in their fantasy championships, I'm sure. I won't say that any single one of these players in the Cincinnati passing game stack is a priority play, and all of them are great plays. If you're entering something like 3 to 5 lineups, this is a great opportunity to mix and match, to add a single stack, try to add a double stack, adding in a player like Tyler Boyd or CJ Uzoma to the mix, who could easily get 5 to 8 targets in this game. But the player I have to hit on is Joe Mixon. There are so many ways that Joe Mixon hits in this game that I'm going to be over the field on him for sure. In our on our big board tool, again, I'm going to mention it. He is highest of all running backs on this game by far. And to be honest, I was looking at Odd Shopper. Compared to our projections, his rushing yard prop line just kind of makes no sense. It's 74.5 right now on FanDuel, where I'm looking. We haven't projected for like 96.5. So it's just no question here. The Raiders are the worst rush defense. Them and the Steelers, if depending on what sample size you're looking at over the season, are the worst rush defense of any defense in the playoffs. And as I said before, the Bengals are expected to win, 70% chance or so. So at some point they're going to be up, and at some point they're going to be leaning on Mixon. I think he is the best player in the Cincinnati offense.
No question, man. And if anyone's looking at this and saying, well, Samaje Perine got a decent amount of work in the regular season, that's the regular season. Oftentimes you're going to see a lot of these players that were spelling other guys get very, very minimal work in the postseason, because the purpose is for the starter to get not rested, obviously, but at the running back position to stay fresh. And as Joe Mixon, someone that has an injury history, missed like 10 games last year, this is one of those guys where, Matt, I would not be shocked to see his snap count through the roof this week, which just makes him that much more appealing. I mean, I don't see any reason anyone else is getting any more than a carry or two in this offense. You're talking about Samaje Perine and Chris Evans. Week 16, 82% snaps for Joe Mixon, 71% in week 17. I think you're looking probably at another 85% snap game for Mixon, which is just too tough to get away from.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're seeing the snaps for the bell cow running backs increase in the playoffs across the board. And that's what we're going to expect for Joe Mixon here, especially in crunch time or in the red zone. Don't expect any other player back there. In week 16 and 17, the last two games that Mixon played, he had 10 total red zone touches. So I am not concerned that once they get close to the goal line, Mixon is going to be utilized either through the air or on the ground.
All right. Anything else for this team?
I don't really think so. I think you could argue that the Bengals defense should be on people's lists here. Things could implode for the Derek Carr-led Raiders. Not saying that's the most likely thing here, but I think the Bengals defense at a pretty decent salary looks like a solid value play.
I think any defense.
Absolutely.
At that point, any defense. I think Awesemo is a really, really good option this week too, especially if you're stacking. He's really the only cheap wide or tight end that I'm looking to get to at this point. So there aren't a lot, unless you're looking for like Jonnu Smith to get an end zone target or something, or Foster Moreau. You think he's going to get enough work? I don't. Awesemo is probably the one guy that stands out to me as one of the cheaper options. I think he's perfectly fine. And we've seen him with some big games earlier in the year. I'm not saying it happens, but it's a clear non-zero percent chance that he gets there this week. So especially in Bengals stacks, that's something I feel pretty good about. All right. So let's move this one on New England and Buffalo, and then we'll talk the Sunday slate. Hit that thumbs up too if you haven't done so yet. Someone said, can we please stop with the overlords? I'm not serious about that, fella. But there is an algorithm here. So you have to feed it. That's how it works. It's YouTube, man. Oh, we have free content too today. If you're playing NBA, ownership projections entirely free, and NHL player rankings are totally free as well. And if you want to get in on everything, get 25% off your first week. Ownership, top stack tool for all sports, not just basketball or football, but every sport we have. You got PGA today as well, MMA, you name it. Ownership projections, top stack tool, boom bust, top golfer tool, right? Like everything we have on every sport for Yahoo, DraftKings, FanDuel, you name it, all of them. Use the promo code NFL Strategy Show, all one word, all caps. When you go to awesemo.com/join, get 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. All these tools built by Awesemo himself, Alex Baker. Clearly, you know who he is. All right, Matt, New England. Here's an interesting one because the first time one of the games you essentially just throw out the window because of the wind, right?
Right.
But I will say, I think people are sleeping on the fact that Buffalo comes into this game with a different game plan. I'm telling you right now, they're running the football more with success. They have not had the hardest matchups recently, but the Patriots have not won their games and gotten into the playoffs because they have an incredible offense, right? It's not the case. Their offense is fine, probably above average, but not great. So I don't see why Buffalo can't once again look to use the run game pretty heavily with Devin Singletary, as they've done now for the past 5 weeks with great success. One of those games was against the Patriots. Sure, Singletary only had 12 carries, but he was targeted 6 times and still saw almost 20 opportunities. So interesting game. I think it looks different than all of the other ones, particularly the win game did. But we'll kick it off with New England. What are you doing here with the skill players starting at running back?
All right. I am fine playing a New England running back. This is the way they want to play football, especially in the playoffs. Say what you want about it being a narrative, but Bill Belichick wants to win this game with defense and running the football. We all know that. Let's see if they can actually get it done. I actually think that we are underrating how much the cold weather will have an effect here. I know it doesn't mean the same thing as when we have high winds. We don't see passing attacks plummet in the same way. But the game time temperature is expected to be 3 degrees in Orchard Park and feel closer to -10. I don't know if it's like that as the night goes on and it gets later and later and that Buffalo wind kicks up. If this game really comes down to who wants to tackle more. And honestly, that sounds like the kind of game Bill Belichick dreams of in his sleep. And so I do wonder if this game ends up going under its total, which is already at 44. And though I think it was extreme, like you said, in that wind game where the New England offense just passed 3 times, that was probably an outlier. I still think that it's going to be a very, very rush-focused game script for Mac Jones and company. So Damian Harris, I'm fine with him. Ramondre Stevenson and Brandon Bolden are kind of the players that I'm kind of leaning on in tournaments because if Harris is hurt or just isn't 100%, I know that New England doesn't really care about who they want to use in their backfield. So Stevenson at 4,700, he seems really interesting to me. The Buffalo defense is no joke, but they have been a little bit easier to run against than pass upon for most of the year.
For sure. I was watching a documentary the other day on the coldest town on earth, Matt. Okay. Yakutsk. Okay. It's in Siberia, and the temperatures drop as low as like -71, -73 Celsius. And these people, if you bring something outside, if you bring a pot of water outside, you throw it up in the air, by the time it leaves the bucket, it's frozen, right? Just ice. Okay. It's insane. It's insane. It gets cold.
That sounds terrible.
Oh, awful. People live there too. Like kids trek to school and they can deal with it. Not for me. Not for me. Call me what you will, but I couldn't do that. My point in saying that is it's going to be cold in Buffalo. Hell, the high here the other day in the suburbs of Philadelphia was like 15, 16. I still took the dog for a walk. I still survived. Now I'm not going out there as an offensive lineman with no sleeves on. I'm not insane, right? I mean, I had gloves on and thermals, but I had people commenting and on the after the fact on one of our shows earlier this week saying, Loughy, you're wrong about that. The weather's going to be just like it was when they faced earlier this year, which is just entirely untrue. There's not going to be the same wind. Like these players would much rather play in frigid temperatures. It's going to suck. The tie is going to be like 3 degrees at game time. It's going to suck. There's no doubt about it. But Josh Allen played at Wyoming. You know, Mac Jones plays in New England. It's cold. It gets cold in Buffalo, as we know. But you're not going to have those wins. These wins are not going to be anything like they were. So do I agree with you that it's going to be a run-focused approach for New England? Sure. They already run the football a ton. Will they run it a little bit more? Will it be skewed a bit? Yes. But 3 pass attempts, I don't see that. Now, in the same breath, I don't really like the pass catching options that much anyway. Their passing attack is not that great. I like Damian Harris a lot. And I think that he will lead the way here. And Ramondre Stevenson probably gets a little bit less work. If you're desperate for a running back that's cheap, I think Brandon Bolden could get, 4 to 6 targets, which is interesting. But the passing game, like, I'm with you. I think it's going to be rushing focused. But you cannot compare this to a game where the football literally went sideways when you tried to kick a field goal. It's totally, totally different.
Yeah, I agree. Here's what's surprising to me. I wasn't on the passing game for this New England offense at all until I saw that, if you look at our props tool, the biggest over we have right now is on Jacoby Myers, 40.5. We haven't projected for nearly 55 receiving yards. I'm going to have to work through my weather bias in order to see how that happens here. And I know Buffalo has been a little bit tougher to pass on since Trey White went down for the year. But we're still talking about a team who is top 8 in the NFL in yards per pass attempt allowed and top 3 in the NFL in points per play allowed. I just don't see Mac Jones coming into Buffalo and dominating through the air. I see a scenario where New England wins, but doesn't it seem like if they do, it's because one of those or multiple of those running backs hit and they did just enough
for sure
offensively? Yeah.
Oh, no. Look, I'm with you. I'm saying it's just we can't compare the two. It's not a apples to apples situation. That's all I'm saying. Like, the wins were terrible. But I like Damian Harris this week. Listen, when it comes to the goal line opportunities, that guy's going to get them. And when you've got that 2 touchdown, 3 touchdown upside, let me get it, man. Like, against this Buffalo team, he had 3 rushing touchdowns just a few weeks ago. I'm not calling for that again, but Damian Harris is going to get a lot of work. I really like him this week. I just don't really want to get to the pass catchers all that much is what I'm saying. And by the way, Damian Harris is not projected for 25% ownership on a 2-game slate. It is extraordinarily low for a team that wants to run the football against the inferior run defense. So he's my top play from this side. Who's yours?
I think I agree with you in a vacuum, but I'm going to be fading him because I'm going to be using New England players as one-offs in tournament rosters mostly. So I want players who are going to have lower ownership. I totally get it. Harris can fit here. Probably my highest owned player is going to be Jacoby Myers, and I don't love it.
All right. Well, hey. Wait, in the passing game or or on the team in general?
Team in general.
Okay. Are you getting to any stacks for New England?
I haven't yet as I've built out my lineups. I'm not totally against it. But, we're talking about a player in Mac Jones who's averaging like 222 passing yards per game and playing a Buffalo defense, which is, besides the New England defense, the best defense overall in the playoffs. So I think it's super low probability and not something you need to get to if just playing a few lineups.
All right. So on the other side of this one, Buffalo gets interesting. And again, like I said, I do think this is a run heavy approach. I really like Damian Harris, but I also like Singletary again. They finally, after years, almost 3 years, came to the realization that he's the real deal. I mean, Singletary's a good player. You can use him as a 3-down back. You guys are tired of me saying this, but I'm going to keep saying it until everyone acknowledges that I was right, Matt. No, this guy.
Did you hear one of the rumors going around right now is that the 69,420th subscriber was the Buffalo Bills, and they finally listened to you because you've been saying this for 2 seasons. You really have, about Devin Singletary specifically, how if they were able to just make themselves a little bit more balanced, that they would be able to unlock. And it feels like they're really leading that way, right? We've seen him get so many opportunities, especially over the last 2 games, 23 opportunities against Atlanta in week 17, 19 opportunities, including 6 in the red zone last weekend. The only thing I'm concerned about is we're using a sample size against the Jets and the Falcons, and then we're trying to project how he's going to do against the Patriots. But
Agreed. Now, we have one recent game against them. He only had 12 carries, but he did have a rushing touchdown. He was also targeted 6 times. I want to tell you this, though. I don't think that Singletary, I think Singletary's ownership is fine. We have him at like 52%. I don't think he should be more than twice as popular as Damian Harris, though. I really don't. I know he has the pass catching upside. Understandable. But there's also still a quarterback that can take the ball in from goal line scenarios or inside the 10. I like Devin Singletary a lot this week, but I don't think he should be twice as highly owned as Damian Harris, because Damian Harris will get the goal line work. He has legitimate 20-plus carry upside in this game as well. So save for the fact that Singletary does have more receiving upside, and I love that. I think they should be a little bit closer in ownership. But if Buffalo's smart, Matt, they keep giving this guy carries, and they're favored in this game at home, cold weather, and it feels like he should get a lot of work once again. I don't see why he wouldn't.
Looks good on paper. He's basically taken over that backfield from all other players. Zach Moss and Matt Breida are complete afterthoughts here. So yeah, as you said, the concern here is Josh Allen still getting about 50% of the rushes inside the 10. There was a game where Singletary actually ended up hitting in the fourth quarter of that game, but Josh Allen had 2 scrambled TDs in the first quarter. This team is definitely moving towards a slightly more balanced approach. I will add, though, in our advanced stats tool, which only goes through week 17 right now, they are still the third most pass-heavy team in schedule-adjusted rush rate. And in game-adjusted pace of play, they're a little bit slower. They're middle of the pack. Here's the thing I'm concerned about, though. If New England's rushing a lot and Buffalo is balanced compared to Las Vegas, Cincinnati, which is going to have a lot of passes, you could have like 60% of the plays, total plays, in this New England Buffalo game compared to Las Vegas Cincinnati. So if you're talking about just a 2-game slate, I'm actually a little bit bearish on this game overall. I'll play any of the big Buffalo options. We should get into it for a minute, but I am actually a little bit wary about playing these players.
That's fair. Antoine says Jacobs is a better play than Harris anyway. He's also, again, getting 53% projected ownership. So is Devin Singletary. They're both at 53%. Harris is at 25%. So on a 2-game slate, when I have, you understand what I'm saying? I'm not saying that he should be projected the highest. I'm saying that when you have multiple touchdown upside, as Harris very clearly does, and we've seen that a lot recently, and their tendency or inclination to run the football as much as they can in a 3-degree temperature game where they already want to run the football. Yeah, I think Harris at 25% should be less than that. But look, Buffalo's a weird one in the passing game, Matt, because Emmanuel Sanders is back, but he hadn't been great this year anyway, outside of early in the season. Gabriel Davis had 14 targets last game, only hauled in 3 of them. But you have Stephon Diggs, you have Dawson Knox, Cole Beasley. They have a lot of players in the passing game that can make our lives miserable. And of course, Josh Allen, who is going to be right now the highest owned quarterback on the slate. Or actually him and Joe. Wow, he's below Joe Burrow. That's surprising.
I kind of get it. Just again, I've said it like 3 times already, but it's the game environment, the expected game environment here. Josh Allen's ceiling is the highest on the slate. Honestly, because of the way that this game looks, I'm probably skinny stacking Josh Allen if I'm choosing to play him, because I think his true ceiling game, at least here, comes by scoring on the ground a couple times. So obviously Stephon Diggs is the top option in this receiving core. We have him slightly below salary-based expectations in our projections. Who cares? It's a small slate. You need to make these kinds of adjustments. When we're talking about small slates, there are only a few players, regardless of game environment, who can score and produce on this 2-game slate, like Stephon Diggs. Cole Beasley always pops in our projections. He's at a 20% target share in the last 5 games that he's played. And you mentioned it, Gabriel Davis, along with Dawson Knox and surprisingly Isaiah McKenzie. They all have between an 11 and 15% target share in their last 4 games. So I think they all fall into the dart throw category. But on this 2-game slate, I'm not against any of them. I'm probably not playing 2 of them though.
Caleb said, I love you guys, but this Raiders hate is wild. I didn't think I was hating on the Raiders. I loved Zay Jones, Waller, like I said, at the position. Maybe if you're saying like the Raiders are just that we're saying they're going to lose. I think it's going to be a shootout. Dude, if I were taking one side of this game, I'm not betting sides here, probably take the Raiders 5 points because Cincinnati, they have no playoff experience here. I think this game stays competitive for sure. But anyway, Matt, let's talk about Prize Picks before we get to this Sunday slate. If you haven't done so yet, there's a couple things you need to do, right? First of all, you should play at Prize Picks because the platform's awesome. People love it. And you see the screenshots coming in all the time. It's getting more popular by the day for good reason. But that doesn't mean it becomes tougher because you're not just going in there and playing against other people who are using that are using tools and optimizers and stuff. No, you can use our tools entirely for free, like Odds Shopper, which is huge for something like this. Our free player prop tools over at Awesemo. And more than anything, you get a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you sign up over at Prize Picks, which is a daily player prop platform. There's no juice on either side. You're just taking the over or the under, and there's a legitimate edge there. You're just building lineups with props. You could do a 5-player lineup, 10 extra entry fee. If you hit 4, though, unlike a traditional book where you just bust one leg out, if one leg busts and you're still not making anything, you hit 4 or 5, you're still 2xing your money. Like, it's a great way to make money and hit big, but also to build your bankroll and really sustain it over the long run. You get a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum, $90 value, all of our tools, every sport. All you have to do is use the link that Jordan Klein's going to put in the chat, or already did. Give him the benefit of the doubt here. Yeah, he did. Or the one in the description, link in the description below if you want to check it out. Free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Just wait 24, 48 hours. We'll email you, get your free month, get into the premium Discord chat, the office hours where you got the pros helping you better your game. All of our tools for every sport available to you. And when you sign up, though, use the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO, because you'll also get $100 first match deposit bonus. It's a win-win-win. No reason whatsoever not to do it at all. Like, even if you don't think you're going to play much on Prize Picks, you still get a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum and up to $100 deposit bonus. It's crazy. So check it out. Use our free tools too for Prize Picks. And of course, download it in the App Store, Google Play Store, or go to prizepicks.com. Very cool site. You'll enjoy it. Get the free month, get the $100 deposit bonus, and head on over there today. Sponsor of the strategy show, prizepicks.com. All right, Matt, Philly and Tampa Bay. Let's keep it simple here. The weather could actually help Philly. And I said it earlier. I'm not hitting Philly here. I mean, do I think they can cover 8.5? Sure. 8.5. So in the NFL, 8.5 is easy to cover, even if you're not the greatest team. But I know this is the big thing. Is Tampa's run defense spectacular? Yes. But this is exactly what I said when they faced the Saints, and I will say it again. Everyone said that they're going to lean on the ground, or they're going to lean on the passing game because they can't develop a run game. Going into that Saints game, and I know they were dealing with some COVID injuries, but mostly offensively, going into that game, the Saints actually were number 1 in run defense in yards per attempt and yards allowed per game, not Tampa Bay. The Eagles ran for 250 yards on them. So I don't think they're just going to abandon the run here. I think they will run. I think those wins are going to benefit them as well. And that makes this really interesting as we work our way over to the Sunday slate. So does that mean I love the running backs? Not at all, especially given that we don't know if Miles Sanders plays. Jordan Howard, I don't know if he's 100% yet. Boston Scott, like, it's kind of a mess. But from an overall game strategy standpoint, I don't know if we should just be saying, yeah, they're going to throw 50 times, because there's zero chance you win by doing that against the Bucs. You're muted.
Sorry about that. You know, I will say this. I think that the most likely outcome in this game, even in the rain, if the Eagles are to keep it close, it's because they ran well. But if you just look at the metrics, the Buccaneers are actually the biggest pass funnel defense in the playoffs, and they rival the Bengals, in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to opposing offenses. So it's not impossible to pass on the Buccaneers, especially when you know that often the Buccaneers have passed so often that they're scoring a lot of points, forcing their opponents into a pass heavy and usually a faster game script. I agree with you, though. The way that this goes even remotely well for Philadelphia is they run the ball decently. Not sure who it is. And honestly, I just think it comes down to the decision making of Jalen Hurts. He's going to have to tuck it and run sometimes in this likely sloppy weather game here. 70 degrees Fahrenheit expected at game time, but 20-mile-per-hour winds means, he might not be able to throw it very often. And so, we could see a very college-esque option run game. It is easier to beat the Buccaneers through the air, but in this game, it could go better than expected here. I just got to remember, these are low probability plays, except for Jalen Hurts, I would say.
For sure. What I'm saying, Matt, isn't that they don't throw the ball. It's that if you're expecting them to completely abandon the run, Nick Sirianni and anyone with a brain knows that that's not how you're going to beat Tampa. Like yes, they're a pass funnel defense. So you might be being like, Loughy, what do you mean? That's completely counterintuitive. It's not, though, because their passing game isn't good. So just give the ball back to Tom Brady and let them march down the field on you. You're better off trying to control time of possession. That's just logic right there. It really is. You're better off moving the football down the field, trying to do so methodically, pick up 5 yards per attempt on the ground, and lean on the ground. That's the only way you win. It's the only way you win. If they abandon the run, they're going to get smoked, but you're going to get some big games from them. They might get smoked anyway, Matt, and then have to throw if they're down a lot early, because Jonathan Gannon doesn't make decent adjustments until halftime. And if you do that against a good team, you're done. But
I do want to add this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I do want to add this, that over their last 3 games played, Tampa Bay was actually bottom 10 in the NFL in yards allowed per carry. And I know they had like a playoff spot basically locked up, but they were
one of those
was
against the Jets, by the way.
Exactly. There are some suspect things about this defense. I was looking at the stats from a couple weeks ago, and they were up in the top 7 in yards per carry allowed. They finished the season 17th in the NFL in yards allowed per rush attempt. I'm going to, just because they're a big pass funnel does not mean they're impossible to beat on the ground. In fact, compared to previous seasons, This is a very different Tampa Bay defensive line. We're still talking about low probability outcomes, but yeah, a little glimmer of hope for Philadelphia.
Look, 121, going back to week 13, 121 rushing yards to Atlanta, 173 to Buffalo, 150 to the Jets. They had 2 games in between there with New Orleans and Carolina where they didn't allow much at all, but 150 to the Jets. Carter had that like 50-yard run to start the game up, 110 to Carolina last week. The Eagles are going. All I'm saying is they're going to do what they can to run the ball. That's all. And if Miles Sanders does play, he would be my guy for sure, assuming he's not limited. Mind you, there's a hand injury. It's not a hamstring or lower body, right? It's not his ankle again. So if he plays, I'm going into this one assuming that he's good to go and he will be the lead back. So Sanders at that price point would be a guy that I like. In the passing game, I'll take some shots on Devontae Smith because he's good and he can make elite, insanely acrobatic, athletic catches downfield, and that's important in a spot like this. But my favorite pass catching option is just always going to be Dallas Goedert, who, in my opinion, is wildly underpriced here. And while they will run, they still have to throw against the Tampa team whose offense is going to score points. Give me a lot of Zach Ertz this weekend. That's too cheap. He should be in the 5,000s for sure.
Yeah, Dallas Goedert, in terms of our big board, again, referencing that a lot more this week, he is our top overall tight end, meaning he is the best combination of floor, ceiling, and value. A player like Gronkowski on the other side of the ball is 6,400. Dallas Goedert, who could have as many targets here, probably not, but could have as many targets as Gronkowski at 4,500. That's going to help you do a whole lot more with the rest of your lineup. We saw in week 17 when he last played, we saw 7 targets. He had a 9-target game in week 15. I don't think that there's going to be any one player on the Eagles who we see just completely rack up a huge target share, as good as Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert are. But if you're talking about probability of getting 7+ targets, I think the probability is actually kind of high for both. So these Jalen Hurts skinny stack, I think I might be a little over the field on both, and Dallas Goedert the best overall value in this pass catching core.
For sure. Oh, and I'm with you on Hurts because I don't see any way that they don't use his legs in this game, right? Like there's no way, especially with the win. I think you're going to see him run. He had 2 rushing touchdowns against them earlier in the season as well. So yeah, anytime you have a rushing quarterback, you have to like them. And that's kind of where I'm at here. They don't need to win. I think Jalen Hurts still has a good game. Chronic Smith says, I love this show. I really like this show. I really appreciate you guys, but why are we only covering 5 games? There are no 5-game slates available on DK. No, we're covering the Saturday slate, which we did individually, and then we're covering the Sunday slate individually. This is not covering the full 6-game slate because those contests are significantly smaller. So we already covered Saturday slate on its own, and now we're covering the Sunday slate on its own. We thought that would be the best way to go about this for you guys who want to come back to this after Saturday. All right. Matt, with Tampa Bay, it might not seem like a big deal, but Cyril Grayson is doubtful for this game, right? I see Q tags on Evans and Perriman. I assume they play, but that probably opens things up if Grayson's out for Tyler Johnson. 13 targets over his last 2 games. He's cheap. Leonard Fournette was designated to return from the IR. There's a good chance that he plays this week, and Ronald Jones is doubtful as well. So a couple actual significant injury spots to be paying attention to for Tampa Bay going into Sunday.
Yeah, I think Leonard Fournette plays, and if he does play, he looks like the best play on the slate, just from the fact that you play in DFS, you play running backs at home who are favored by not 8 or 9 points, depending on where you're looking at it. We're talking about a 75 to 80% win probability for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. And Leonard Fournette, especially with Ronald Jones expected to be out, I don't think Le'Veon Bell is going to suddenly become a bell cow here. If Fournette can play, I think he steps back into a huge role and has a great game script, at least. I don't know if the environment is going to be great with that weather, but I do think they are going to lean on him plenty often. And the Eagles are pretty darn good against the run. They're top 6 in the NFL in yards per carry this season. They were 14th over their last 3 games, so they slipped a little bit, but still they're legit. I still don't think it matters just from a just a DFS fundamentals perspective. You play starting running backs with this many opportunities when they're expected to win at home.
Well, especially when you're down Godwin, you're down Antonio Brown. You still have Evans and Gronk, sure, and Tom Brady likes to spread the ball around. But even when they were at 100%, Leonard Fournette was averaging like 7 to 9 targets per game. So, you know, his pass catching upside here is way too significant, and he gets targets in the red zone to ignore. I think Leonard Fournette is, you want to talk about wildly underpriced? There's no way Fournette should be this close in price to Edwards-Helaire and Miles Sanders and Darrell Williams and Tony Pollard and Ronald Jones. Like he's $200 more expensive than Ronald Jones. It's insanity.
It doesn't make any sense, and it's really priced up. Usually they do something where they price him up in anticipation of him coming back. It almost feels like the ball was dropped a little bit. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, it makes no sense. He's the best value on the slate if he plays. And, you know, we got to mention here, it looks like this team is just hurting overall offensively to the point where I'm worried about them. I think Awesemo was saying this in the chat here. You know, they're signing John Brown off the street. Like, that's not a good sign headed into your playoff matchup. Maybe they get by Philadelphia, but I don't know. This definitely looks like a tough road without Antonio Brown, obviously, without Chris Godwin, beat up backfield, and we've seen Tom Brady do it before, but this one's going to be tough.
Yeah, I think Gronk eats them up, man. I do. I think Gronk is in a stellar spot. Let me put it to you very simply, Matt. This is kind of how I'm looking at this one. I've already said the Eagles stay competitive if they're capable of controlling time of possession, really just moving the ball methodically downfield. I know that's super cliche to say, but it's 100% true. And it's the way that they've won games this season. All right. Look at how their defense has played against good offenses. Go back to Mahomes, go back to Brady, go back to Justin Herbert, go back to Dak Prescott in week 3. They got torched by it. Okay. They haven't won a single game against an above 500 team all year. Maybe the Saints are above 500, but they didn't have anybody in that game. I can't remember. Either way, bad stuff, right? So the Bucks are going to move the football. I will go to Mike Evans. I will go to Gronkowski. I'll go to Fournette. I just don't really have any objections to anybody on the offensive side of the ball for Tampa. I don't. And I know it's going to be windy. I know, sustained with, but I'm still going to get to quite a bit of them this week.
Of course. They're in great spots if you took away the weather. And the Eagles are dead last in the NFL in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. Now, that tends to be highly variable, but when we got some Philly guys in chat and you kind of adding on to it, saying that this is a real vulnerability here, okay, now I'll start to layer that on as well. I do think that Gronkowski is the highest probability option, but Evans could have one of those 2 catches, 2 touchdown games here as well. If Brady sees an exploitable matchup, he will pick on it all game long until the Philadelphia defense does something to stop it. And it's hard to say what that's going to be before the game, but I do think he eventually finds it.
Someone said Gronk will be locked down and force the ball to others. They're going to do it. You can't lock down him and Mike Evans, especially with the linebacking core they have. I'll go to all of them, honestly. And Slay's good. Darius Slay's good, but put a good quarterback out there. Let's see what happens when Mike Evans catches multiple touchdowns. All I'm saying is don't be afraid to get to these guys. Tyler Johnson, too, I have no problem with, assuming that Cyril Grayson's out, just as a low-owned option. He's only 13% projected ownership right now. I love them all. I love Fournette as well. And Tampa stacks, despite the weather, should be in everybody's in the forefront of everybody's attention. All right, Matt, San Francisco, Dallas. Hey, one more time. We got almost 300 people watching on a Thursday show. This is awesome. Hit that thumbs up for us. Help us get to, I think we can get to 100. We're at 83. We need 17 to get to 100. Very, very doable here. If you forgot, no sweat. I don't blame you. If you're watching on your phone, click out of chat. You can hit that thumbs up and pop right back in there. Helps us greatly. And as Jeff asked me to say, help us combat the YouTube overlords. All right. So talk to me about San Francisco here. This is an upset brewing, Matt. I can smell it in the air. And this is not the homerism in me. I said in the beginning of the year before it started, San Francisco is a damn good team, way better than they were last year when the entire squad was injured. I think this game is super competitive, and they've got the weapons to make things happen with Eli Mitchell, with George Kittle, with Debo, Jimmy G coming back with a great 17-0 comeback from down 17-0 last week. Their secondary has some struggles, but this is a good San Francisco team, man. They're a very good team.
Nobody wants to play the San Francisco 49ers right now, who are, in my opinion, one of the most battle-hardened. I don't like these war metaphors we're always making in football, but seriously, they have been tested all season long, playing in that brutal NFC West. You got to give credit to that division, and as well as the AFC North. Those teams beat up on each other all season long to the point where this game against Dallas isn't going to feel more intense than a lot of those late season divisional matchups that they had going down the stretch here. And just to start things off, Eli Mitchell, in the 4 games that he's played since week 11, he has the 3rd highest opportunity share. That's just share of total team opportunities, targets and rushes in the entire NFL, higher than Joe Mixon. We're talking on the same level as Alvin Kamara, 42.3% average. Now, it's been down a little bit since he came back from injury, but in week 17, we saw him get nearly 40% of the San Francisco 49ers total opportunity. So now you're talking about a running back who is kind of in the mid-salary range. Like, absolutely, I'll take Eli Mitchell, especially if we think the upset potential is as high as it is. I still think that the Cowboys are the more likely team to win, but this 3-point spread right now kind of telling me that it's basically just the home field advantage. These teams are essentially a wash. And while the San Francisco 49ers passing attack has been volatile in terms of its overall production, you know who the big names are. I'm not telling you not to play George Kittle or Debo Samuel. Find spots here because the Cowboys are not a world beater defensively either.
For sure. So ultimately, we have George Kittle too over at Odd Shopper. You want to talk about a prop that we really like this week. He's struggled recently just in terms of overall opportunities. And last week it was really strange. He had like 5 receptions for 10 yards, but in a postseason game with a 50.5 point total, he's got a 50.5 point or 50.5 yard receiving prop over at DraftKings, because at OddsShopper, it just gives you where the best bet is. You don't have to look for it. So whatever book is available to you, whether you're in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, wherever state it's open to you, whatever books are there. We've got him well projected, well over the 78.6 receiving yards. That's what's so cool about OddsShopper is, well, it's free, so you can check it out if you want. You don't need me to tell you, but our projections are right there. Our expected ROI is right there. The expected win rate on these props is right there, just built by all of our amazing data scientists behind the scenes that are also pro bettors, pro DFS players. They're the ones that are doing this. And yeah, you say, okay, where's the best bet for this? Boom, DraftKings right there. George Kittle, we have projected with a 32% expected ROI on the over. So yeah, anytime you can get that, I'm going to take it. I agree with you on Mitchell as well. But once again, going back to this, DraftKings pricing is odd. Kittle's at 5,800 in a 50.5 total game. I like that. Granted, I also like Kelsey. I also like Gronk. There's a lot of places to go, but I'm not shying away from Kittle here just because he's had a couple underwhelming games lately. That's all.
Yeah, it's like we would be lucky to have these many top end tight ends on a main slate. We get them in a 3-game slate. It's kind of ridiculous. And just to add on to how good OddsShopper has been, when New York sports betting went live at 9 a.m. Eastern time last Saturday, by 9:30, it was loading with the New York tab for me so I could get my latest New York bet information. It was awesome. I've got a couple degenerate friends who have already expanded into the prop betting game in sports. They don't even understand because they just text me, just do what OddsShopper says. It's literally that simple. Back to it. I think this tight end is where I want to spend my salary on the Sunday slate. I know we've got other players, but I think I can find value options in players like Leonard Fournette. So yeah, I agree with you here. George Kittle, while he doesn't necessarily have the same exact floor and ceiling projection as a player like Kelsey, we've seen Kittle have, some of the best performances by a tight end in NFL history this season. We know 150 yards is truly in his range of outcomes. Not saying it's going to happen here. The Dallas defense is about league average in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. But once again, they do lean towards being a pass funnel. I think we are going to see a lot of points in this game.
Sure. And Danny Green in chat said Kittle could hit that with 2 catches. Yeah, that's what you love about him, man. Insane after the catch ability. He can be used essentially as a wide receiver or as a receiver, which I absolutely love. Matt, where are you going on the opposite side with Dallas? You've got Ezekiel Elliott, who it's a down season, if we're being honest, efficiency-wise. I don't know what type of workload Pollard gets, but then you've got Lamb, you have Dalton Schultz. Throw last week's game out the window. They were playing backups, but Schultz still did find the end zone twice. He's got 8 on the season now. Amari, Gallup's on the IR, so maybe we look at like a Cedric Wilson as a low-end dart throw. But where do you go with Dallas offense? A lot of mouths to feed here.
Yeah, and I think the salary is a little too high on all of them to say that any one of them is a priority. So I'm not going to tell you that CeeDee Lamb is a bad play at 7,300. I think if he were around 6,900, I'd be all over it. And then you're talking about Amari Cooper, who's 7,100. You're not getting really any discount. This is on FanDuel, by the way. So I do think that there is some pricing discrepancies on DraftKings, that Ezekiel Elliott in a game script where they do get ahead looks okay on DraftKings at 6,100, but I'm not going to tell you it's a priority play. I'd rather save my salary, and even like 6,700 for a player like Kelsey seems more appealing than 6,100 Ezekiel Elliott. I'll find some way to save that salary and get up there.
No, Raymond, we did not forget about Mitchell. We actually talked about him quite a bit. Matt said how much he liked him at his price, and I agree. If you're getting that type of workload, no matter what, 20 plus carries, go to Eli Mitchell any day of the week. Who are your top plays from Dallas?
So I'm going to go to the big board here and see that we don't really have a singular player in the priority category, but we do have CeeDee Lamb, Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, and Dak Prescott all firmly in the, you can play them at their current salary. They are right around salary-based expectations in our projections. So right now, CeeDee Lamb is coming up as the highest owned player in my current player pool. But if you told me that it's Amari Cooper at 7,100 that actually ends up with a bigger game here against the San Francisco defense, also right around league average in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, no qualms with that. Really, I'm just kind of playing them as one-offs, and I guess I do have one or two here with two of them, but it's because I don't really know. I'm just kind of taking shots and knowing that there's a ceiling game in there somewhere.
All right, let's wrap this one up with Pittsburgh and Kansas City. Of course, like I said, we'll have a ton of showdown content for the Monday slate and a lot more shows coming up throughout the week for the Saturday and Sunday slate. Deeper dive, live before locks, on the contrary, you name it, we got you covered. But appreciate you guys being with us on this Thursday slate. Also over 100 likes, so thank you. And subscribe to the channel if you want to join us here. Matt, Pittsburgh's not a good team. I still think 12.5 points is a lot. Call me crazy. If I had to take one side of this, I'm taking the points. 12.5 points is still a lot, no matter how bad Roethlisberger's been. But bad teams can still produce, bad offenses can still produce good players. And it feels like Najee Harris will be busy in the passing game here. I would also assume that Diontae Johnson is going to be busy in the passing game. The problem with him is he's great just from a PPR standpoint, but it's really difficult to get the production from him from a yardage standpoint with how Roethlisberger has been unable to throw downfield. They haven't been able to create much after the catch, and they're not getting a ton of red zone opportunities either right now. So that's the problem I have with Diontae Johnson, especially at his price.
Yeah, I feel like we did kind of miss the true value window for Diontae Johnson when he was kind of going overlooked in his probability of having a dozen or more targets. You can only say that about a few wide receivers any week. And while that's certainly possible here, and Kansas City has still struggled overall defensively, they've kind of cleaned things up. They're really closer to league average in most passing metrics. They're 14th in the NFL in points allowed per play. They're actually above the league average in terms of playoff teams in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. So I agree with you that Najee Harris and Diontae Johnson are the volume plays of this offense, but I think it was formerly of Awesemo, now of NBC Sports, it was Kyle Dvorak said I'm paraphrasing a tweet. If you loved seeing Pittsburgh get beat 36-10 in week 16, you're going to love them being beat 52-9 in week 19. Because that's just kind of how it feels to me.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm actually not taking the points. I think they're going to get smoked.
Probably, but 12.5 points in a playoff, it's still a lot. I mean, 13.5 you'd prefer, right? 12.5 is tough because you're coming in right below that key number. But do you not want anything from Pittsburgh, Kansas City?
Oh, well, certainly want things
from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that would be insanity, as you might say, Loughy. But from a expected fantasy point standpoint, I'm fine getting to Najee Harris. You know, you're talking about 18 expected fantasy points on a 3-game slate. You can absolutely play that running back with that kind of volume. At 6,600, it's not so bad. I guess my favorite player is Diontae Johnson in terms of just like ceiling and floor here. You could say double-digit targets probably in his range of outcomes. Can Ben Roethlisberger prop up one receiver? He can, but I don't think he can prop up two, period. I really don't. And I don't think the Kansas City defense is going to give up 2 ceiling games here. So at 6,700, you can prioritize other players. I think Kelce is the exact same salary. So I can't say Diontae Johnson is a better player than him, but he's firmly in the you can play him category.
All right, we've got the FanUp NFL stream coming up right after this with Greg and Rayen. So don't go anywhere. Jordan, same stream, right? Yep, FanUp. They got a monster contest coming up for this week. Matt, we're up against it. So hit me with Casey. I think the analysis shouldn't be too difficult here. Very high total, biggest spread of the week. But break this down for us. And again, plenty of content coming up throughout the week if you think we missed anything.
Definitely, guys. Keep it tuned here all weekend long. I'm prioritizing Kelce over Hill. A heel injury for Hill Yeah, they said that it's not much to worry about, but that's something that I'm concerned about. Just for a speedster like that to have anything wrong with his foot heading into the playoffs. I'm not saying he's a zero probability play. In fact, in our big board for the Sunday slate, he's the highest priority option over Kelsey. But I still really, really like Kelsey at that $400 salary discount on DraftKings compared to Tyreek Hill. We saw that game against the Chargers in Week 15 where he showed his true ceiling is still intact. 191 receiving yards on 10 receptions. I realize he needed overtime to get there, and he's only had 9 receptions since that point in the 2 games that he's played. But I don't think the Steelers defense is able to stop both of these players. And the running game, I know it's difficult here because we don't know if Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to play. But if you think that Kansas City is going to smoke the Steelers like I do, one of these running backs is going to get like 20 to 25 opportunities. So you could get a discount Darrell Williams as an obvious play here. I'm fine, even if Clyde plays, taking some shots on him as well.
Me too. We got to pay attention. If one of those guys is out, that's going to be significant, very significant. I've drafted a decent amount of those guys in the underdog best ball playoff leagues too, because they're super, super down in the ADP and people just ignore it. But yeah, ultimately you're talking about a team that the running backs will be involved. If both of them are active, it's tough at those price points because you have Fournette. I think if Sanders plays, he's going to have a heavy workload. It's going to be difficult to figure out who that is. And even Elijah Mitchell is going to get 20 plus carries. So I have some reservations, Matt, just in the sense that if both of them play and aren't limited, that gets messy. But aside from that, if one of them is active and the other isn't, we're going to be in business. Anyway, again, sorry, we were up against it, guys. Try to do as much for each game as possible. But I think we did a great job getting everything for Saturday in. And then a good job for Sunday, but we'll have a ton more Sunday content and Saturday. You guys are the best. Appreciate you hanging out with us as always. Follow Matt at Draftaholic, me at Loughy_D. Shout out to Jordan Klein for producing as always. And stick around the FanUp show. Greg, Rayen coming up right after this on the very same stream. So don't go anywhere. Stick around. Huge contest coming up if you haven't heard of them for this weekend. Peace.
See ya.
What is going on, guys? We've got an exciting football show here. I'm here with Rayen, and it's not that often that Rimpak and I get to chop up football. It's not that often we get to do shows together in general, but certainly have never done a football show together. So that's something I'm looking forward to. We also got a new sponsor here, FanUp. So we're going to be talking to that. They've got a massive football contest this week. You guys could see Jordan Klein, who's sharing his own phone on the screen, which is really exciting. Who knows what kind of text messages Jordan might get over the course of the show. All the more reason to watch, because you never know what ladies might be texting, other things that are going to be going on. Very exciting that Jordan is sharing his screen with us. But so FanUp, if you guys see, we've got the app up right here. Really big contest. They're offering contests, $400,000 prize pool for the football playoffs, $200,000 to first place. Ryan's played on FanUp a lot over the course of the football season. So not only is he going to talk to you guys about some of the stuff that's going on there, but he's going to educate me a little bit as well, because I'm familiar with the app, but I haven't played on as much as Rayen. I'm going to be diving into it this weekend for football. What's going on, Rayen?
No, excited. I guess I'm making my Awesemo NFL DFS show debut. It's my first NFL show. Excited to do a show with you yet again, Greg. I know we don't get to do these as often as we should be doing them, but yeah, speaking of our sponsor, FanUp, shout out to them. I've been able to play on their site for this past season. They had a flex ball contest that ran from week 1 to week 17. It's an interesting twist to, I guess, DFS and a combination of best ball. Imagine if DFS and best ball kind of had a baby together, it would be flex ball is how I would look at it. And more importantly, it's a $200K up first place prize pool. That's eye-opening as is. And these large prize pools on newer sites, there's advantage to be playing them, potential overlay, a new site, being able to figure out a new strategy. Before it gets too popular. It has been very beneficial to me over the past few years, but excited to talk about this. It's a very friendly platform. One thing that stands out to me, and people who hate salaries, this is your best friend, because there are no salary constraints on FanUp's Flexball tournament.
Yeah, and then one other thing I should mention here is that if you guys are just looking to get interested in it, there's a really easy way to just get your foot in the door. You download the app. If you sign up using the promo code Awesemo, you get $20 in free play money just free. Just sign up, use the promo code Awesemo. You don't have to put any money in, and you get $20 in free play money that you could use to enter some contests on FanUp. Also, if you're playing for the first time, you go and sign up using that promo code Awesemo. If you enter 2 entries into this big contest we have on the screen right now, the third entry is going to be 25% off. So good things to take advantage of over at FanUp, but especially just sign up using the promo code Awesemo, $20 free play. No risk to you at all right there. So I want to ask you also, Rayen, what's the scoring like on FanUp, and how does it differ from sites like FanDuel or DraftKings, and how exactly does this flex ball work as compared to just, best ball? What's different about it?
So for sure. And in FanUp scoring, it kind of rewards the quarterbacks for a bit more. Pretty similar scoring to other DFS sites. Passing touchdowns are 4 points. But where it gets different is 20 passing yards are worth 0.05 points. So 20 passing yards are, 0.05 points per yard. So 1 point for every 20 passing yards. The standard has usually been 25 passing yards per 1 point. So that's a little different. You get rewarded for 100-yard receiving game. You get 3 extra points there. And then similar receiving touchdowns are 6 points. 100-yard rushing game is 3 points. So it does reward a quarterback a bit more on FanUp scoring. In terms of roster construction, you get 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex. A flex being you get rewarded 1.5x your favorite running back, wide receiver, tight end for that specific lineup.
Yeah, and then something else we should mention here with the way it works is once you buy in, you're setting a new lineup for the entirety of the playoffs. So this one entry fee is going to cover you for the entire playoffs. And while it's the same contest, you're building a new lineup each week. So that's where it's kind of a combination of a lot of things. DFS, best ball, yearly fantasy, and it's innovative. It's a little bit of a different way to play fantasy sports, which is cool. And then I also want to ask you, because in conjunction with some of the tools we have over at Awesemo, how much different would you look at the projections for individual quarterbacks or wide receivers for FanUp compared to, like DraftKings or FanDuel? Like, are there any quarterbacks or any other positions that you usually look at and think players look vastly different on FanUp compared to the main sites?
Over time with the because the scoring in the sense is for this super wild card weekend, you'll set a team, you'll get a score. Let's say your team puts up 100 points, and next week you set your team puts up 200 points. So entering week 3, your team will have 300 points going into it. So it's aggregated scoring. It gets summed up week by week. So over time, I do think it is beneficial. Obviously, week to week variance kicks in, but targeting, it does help over time to target the quarterbacks that pass a bit more. So it does reward a Josh Allen. It did reward a Pat Mahomes early on the season. Did hit a rough spot in between. Did pick things up back at the end. There was a tear with Tom Brady when Tom Brady was lighting it up. So it does, with that extra 5 yards less, you get that point. It does add up over time, but with such a small sample, with only 5 or 6 weeks, because you can play till the Super Bowl, it won't be as weighted as heavily as it was throughout the season. So I wouldn't worry too much about looking for a passing quarterback. We don't have to worry about a Lamar Jackson in this tournament because he's not there. Kyler Murray's a guy who has rushing upside for sure that you can definitely be a little bit step away. He's not rushing as much as he once he was a rookie or second year player. But looking at the projections, they're pretty close to what we have on the site right now.
Yeah, and then something else I want to ask you, just kind of general strategy, and then we'll talk about some of these players position by position. But you've played on this more than me, obviously, because I have not yet played on it. I'm going to be playing on for the first time this weekend. How do you think you're going to be approaching this in general? Like, do you want to play the chalk more in week 1 and then maybe try to differentiate as the playoffs go on? So let's say you get behind in the standings after week 1. It would make sense to me to be contrarian to try to keep up. But would you change your strategy in terms of being just chalky or contrarian heading into the playoffs and then as the playoffs go on, if that makes sense?
So I definitely think heading into the playoffs, we definitely should be considering chalk. Chalk is good because chalk is usually a highly projected plays with no salary constraints. This is definitely going to pan out for you. So I think going to highly projected plays makes a lot of sense early on. And then, like you said, if things don't pan out, you can pivot. For example, I got burned a couple weeks throughout the season with one being the Thursday night game with Christian McCaffrey. I decided to play him in my flex. 1.5 Christian McCaffrey sounds pretty amazing, right? And he got hurt, and the season was never the same since. And then I missed out on some of the Jonathan Taylor explosion spots, so I didn't finish as high as I once started off on because it was really tough for me to make up ground. In a small setting like this, I do think it'll definitely work out for you where I think going with the chalk early on, a highly projected plays, I haven't seen the ownership to be as sharp on a smaller site, will definitely pay off for you. And then being able to pivot off small plays here and there will work out for you.
All right, so let's start talking about some of the positions now. And like you said, we're still going to be looking at the same positions that there are on other DFS sites, with one difference being is that there is a flex position, which is going to be either a running back, a wide receiver, or a tight end 1.5x. You can't just go plug a quarterback in there. But let's start with some of the quarterbacks. And looking at some of the plays that we have at our disposal this weekend, it's, a lot of the top performing fantasy quarterbacks in the league: Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Tom Brady, Dak Prescott. And given how the scoring works, that it does favor passing yards a little bit more, does this devalue some of the running quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts a little bit?
I do think so. And I do think with the 1.5x flex ball setup, I do think it's very beneficial to stack here. I think if you nail the stack, you're going to be well on your way to placing pretty high on a week-to-week basis. And unfortunately, as Jalen Hurts has been a great fantasy quarterback all year long, and it's not necessary to stack, and Jalen Hurts can definitely be the highest scoring quarterback on his own. There's no denying that. I'm just saying, to reach the upside week in and week out, I do think nailing the stack is very pivotal in this situation. So looking at that thing, I mean, right off the bat, I do think a very popular play of late has been Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase has been lighting it up. I think I'll be shying away a little bit. The Vegas team has been playing pretty well against the perimeter. And I think the Vegas team doesn't blitz as much, and Joe Burrow performs exceptionally well under the blitz, while most of his interceptions have weirdly come when he's not been blitzed. So it's kind of been an interesting situation with Joe Burrow over there. But I think nailing a stack like Matt Stafford at quarterback to Cooper Kupp in the flex can definitely pan out. That same stack on a Monday night game, which it was in Arizona, I think Cooper Kupp had 14 or 15 catches, was amazing. He's been amazing all year long. It's very beneficial to find that stack that you nail if you put him in the flex. I have noticed a lot of the wide receivers are not highly zoned. People go to the higher projected plays. And this weekend, one thing I've noticed, there's in playoffs in general, there aren't those like stud running backs yet. As Derrick Henry hasn't yet to return, there's no Jonathan Taylor. There's no Austin Eckler. A lot of the high-priced running backs we've seen in DFS are not going to be available in the playoffs. So it's going to be really important to nail those running backs as well.
And something else, just looking at our quarterback projections for this weekend slate, and don't forget that this contest over on FanUp, it covers the Saturday games, the Sunday games, the Monday games. And in fact, this is actually a bigger prize pool than what DraftKings has for their Sunday to Monday contest, and more money to first place with $200K. But what do you make of the top quarterbacks to roster from this standpoint? If you just look at our projections, we have Patrick Mahomes project for way more fantasy points than any other quarterback. And then there's a really tight grouping of like Josh Allen, Tom Brady, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Matthew Stafford, Kyler Murray. These guys are all really tight to each other. So do you look at Patrick Mahomes as being far and away the top quarterback option to play on FanUp this weekend? Or is there somebody else you think makes sense as the top overall QB?
And I think based on obviously one way to look at trying to nail like guys who are going to score really high in quarterbacks, and I do think there is a correlation with high Vegas totals and quarterback fantasy performance. And Kansas City has the highest projected implied total at this very moment. Them and Tampa Bay lead the way. So those two guys, Brady and Patrick Mahomes, are exceptional quarterback plays on this type of format. And they're very friendly stacking partners as well. I mean, you can even do a Mahomes double stack with Hill and Kelsey. That had paid off for me earlier on in the year over here on FanUp. And then a Tom Brady, Evans, Gronk could work out for you. And there are ways to get a little different. I don't expect Kelsey to be a very popular flex option. Kelsey can be the highest scoring flex player any given week. He's that special of a player. And it's a Pittsburgh matchup that everyone expects them to get light up Pittsburgh. Even Ben Roethlisberger thought they have no chance against them. He's being kind of sarcastic, but he kind of knows what he's going up against. But one thing I do think it's going to be interesting to see what the running back situation ends up happening. I think we got word yesterday, both Williams and Clyde Edwards-Helaire were limited in practice. So that's going to be very interesting to see how does that affect the game plan. Running backs against Pittsburgh have been a gold mine. So it's a good way to hedge against Patrick Mahomes' ownership if you get Edwards-Helaire healthy, and I do think he's a pretty outstanding running back as is. And you can onslaught teams as well. When the slates get smaller, onslaughting teams, there's no issues. I have no issues going Mahomes, Kelsey, and Edwards-Helaire, or even Hill, just because Kansas City has those explosion games, and you want to be on them when they do.
Yeah, and they're massive favorites. Like you said, biggest team total. It's a game where we expect them to score a lot of points. And just for reference on this game having a high total and what we expect from the other side of the game, well, Ben Roethlisberger is the lowest projected quarterback on the slate, and Patrick Mahomes is the highest. So pretty good indication of where we're expecting the fantasy points to go to in that game from a passing standpoint. Now, if Patrick Mahomes, I think we could pretty clearly agree, is going to be the chalk at the quarterback position. Then I mentioned there's a lot of guys that are grouped together that are just kind of going to be similar after that I mentioned: Josh Allen, Tom Brady, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Matthew Stafford, Kyler Murray. If you were building a lineup that did not have Patrick Mahomes at QB, who would be your second favorite option to go at the position?
So one thing, it was interesting. Philadelphia and Tampa Bay, this will be the second time that they're playing against each other. That usually doesn't happen very often. We get outer conference divisions with the expanded playoffs. We get to see that happen yet again. That game against Philadelphia, Leonard Fournette had a monster game. The Philadelphia secondary has been very impressive all season long. So Tom Brady is fine just because they do throw the ball a lot, and he can definitely rack up 3 to 4 touchdowns. But I do like going to the running back in Tampa Bay. I do think Keyshawn Vaughn is a sneaky running back play, but all things put together, it is tough not to say Tom Brady or Dak Prescott are not one of my second or third favorite quarterbacks to go to, just because of how things play out for them. Dak Prescott, a very, very friendly stacking end as well, where you can go quarterback Dak, wide receiver Lamb, tight end Schultz, but you don't even need to do that with no salary constraints. You can even have Kelsey in there as well. Not all the time you get to jam in all the guys as well.
Yeah, and I think that's also something that, once again, to reiterate, is really key over at FanUp. There's no salary cap here. We're just kind of picking some of the players that are projected for the most fantasy points. And something that's interesting then as we move to running back, and you brought this up at the top of the show, there's no Derrick Henry. The Titans are on a bye. There's no Jonathan Taylor because Carson Wentz and the Colts suck. They missed the playoffs. They lost to the Jaguars. And then some of the other top running backs just aren't in the mix. No Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, other guys that are usually staples at the top of the pricing range for running backs. So we're looking at other guys like Joe Mixon, Leonard Fournette as potentially being the top running back options on this slate. Something else that could be relevant news that just came out a little before we started the show: Ronald Jones isn't practicing today for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So it seems like there's a chance he doesn't play this weekend. That could mean more touches for Leonard Fournette. We know he played the workhorse role for the majority of the season. I view Leonard Fournette as the number one overall running back on the slate. Do you see it any differently? Is there somebody you prefer to Leonard Fournette as the top RB?
Yeah, so Leonard Fournette, obviously, they just ran it in, and it's glad to know that he's going to be hopefully full systems go, obviously, a long extended absence. One thing, him or Mixon also, and their favorite right now. It wouldn't shock me if Vegas wins the team. Vegas wins the game here. I do think they're not getting enough credit in that matchup. But if the game's expected to go the way I expect, I do think Mixon can have a big day. So I do prefer Mixon to Fournette just because Fournette's coming back from an extended absence. I would like to see how things are going leading up to game time for Leonard Fournette, but those two guys definitely stand out. And if Edwards-Helaire is healthy, he's right there with them just because of how well running backs have performed against Pittsburgh over the last 4 to 5 weeks.
Yeah, so to me, that's the chalk of the position. We're looking at Fournette, we're looking at Mixon. Then we've got the next tier of guys where there's the Sony Michel, Najee Harris, who we know has been massively involved in both the run game and the pass game for the Steelers this year. A little bit of a concern for me, though, about how big of underdogs they are. And then we've also got, Josh Jacobs. You brought him as the Raiders potentially being in this game. Zeke Elliott, who's looked pretty washed this year, but we've still seen some good fantasy games. So if you're deviating from the chalk from one of our two RBs, Leonard Fournette and Joe Mixon, who's the next running back that you do think would make the most sense if you're looking to be a little more contrarian?
Yeah, a little bit more contrarian. I mean, the guy's been pissing me off a little late. And James Conner, he gets all these 1-yard rushing touchdowns, exceptional goal line equity for James Conner. In a matchup against the Rams, he played really well against them in the Monday night matchup about a month ago. Conner just gets all the touchdown upside, and it's very valuable to get that in your roster going into this season. So Conner would project for great touchdown equity, but a guy who's upped his running back, and they're running a lot more with him. And then there is a weather concern in in Buffalo this week, is Devin Singletary. If there's a lot of snow there, I expect Singletary and on the other side of things, Damian Harris to get a lot of run in that game if the weather ends up causing that to happen. So I do prefer those guys in this situation. Eli Mitchell would be another obviously interesting option, but we see Deebo Samuel just getting a lot of rushing opportunities, and you can roster Samuel in the wide receiver position, but he's not as appealing as he once was, at least a month ago, as Samuel has just been a monster of late, just getting involved in the passing game, the running game, obviously the receiving game. He's been an absolute stud of late.
Yeah, and I think that's a good talking point to transition to the wide receivers. And the wide receiver position is a lot more stacked than the running back position this week. You got Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel, Jamar Chase. Lots of the top wide receivers are in play for the playoffs. We don't have the top fantasy running backs in play this week. So that to me is going to be looking at this wide receiver position. I think that for the flex position, we're going to prioritize this a little bit as well. And then also to address a question we got here in the YouTube chat where Michael Durbin asked us thoughts on Mecole Hardman with his bump from last week. Don't forget, the main reason Mecole Hardman got a bump last week was Tyreek Hill got hurt warming up for the game. And then the Chiefs, they already knew they were going to be in the playoffs. They didn't want to risk it too much. They really limited the amount of time that Tyreek Hill was on the field. I'm expecting Tyreek Hill to be healthy this week, and particularly for a structure that is no salary cap. I don't think we need to dig too deep to go to a Mecole Hardman. Who is the player, if you like, who's the biggest long shot wide receiver you would take a shot on? Because it just doesn't seem that necessary for this format.
Other guys you want to take a long shot with, I know Josh Allen has been a stud. If the weather is fine in Buffalo, Josh Allen to Diggs stack is pretty appealing. Diggs has the upside to really take off and run. The target should be there. I know it's a tough matchup if JC Jackson follows him around. That can be very difficult for Stephon Diggs, but he's played well in the most recent matchup the other day. The targets are there. So it's going to be a low-owned option, and you're going to get a low-owned Josh Allen potentially, definitely about it, but he's also gets that rushing upside as well. So, and they throw the ball still a significant amount, and it's kind of how the offense goes there. Other guys, I mean, receiving-wise options that are going to get a lot of volume. I don't know how highly owned guys like Deontay Johnson will be. Deontay Johnson should be in store for at least 14, 15 targets at the minimum. I expect them to be behind. And fun fact, did you know Antonio Brown, the trade they got for Antonio Brown was Deontay Johnson?
I did not remember that. But Antonio Brown, who I assume is never going to play in the NFL again. That's a pretty good return.
That's an exceptional return. Yeah. I think Antonio Brown's a very talented player. We'll see if he does. He's actually in the studio with Kanye at the moment, I believe. They're chopping up some beats. Yeah.
Did he text you to tell you that? Is that just exclusive information that went to Rinpack?
Yeah, I got the AB on the speed dial. You already know. But outside of Diggs and Josh Allen, I mean, Josh Allen has the upside to definitely be very high scoring. With no salary constraint, it's not necessary to stack, and you don't have to force to be stacked. You could just target the upside in every position. Like you can go Josh Allen at the quarterback, which with the rushing upside he has, he probably is one of our highest projected QBs on the site. Tight end Kelsey, which is completely fine. Running backs, you could Leonard Fournette, Mixon. That's pretty chalky build. I'm pretty much giving out a lineup. So, and the other wide receivers, in terms of target wise, you can mix and match. Obviously, Cooper Kupp in the flex makes a lot of sense. He's been a lock for 20 points week in and week out. Deebo Samuel definitely stands out to me. And one of the Dallas guys being the other wide receiver is how I would envision just a raw projected points, like your quote unquote FanUp optimal would be something like that. Any disagreements there?
It is so hard to get away from Cooper Kupp, particularly in the flex spot. So just for reference, looking at our projection for him compared to the other players, you know, we've got Leonard Fournette's projected for 22 fantasy points. That's all well and good. None of the tight ends are projected for over 20 fantasy points. We've got Tyreek Hill just slightly over 20 fantasy points. That's like the floor for Cooper Kupp. If you played Cooper Kupp in DFS over the last couple of weeks and he scored 20 fantasy points, you'd be like, oh crap, I got a bad Cooper Kupp game. They just don't really exist actual bad games. So in a structure where there's no salary cap, it's just hard to envision a scenario where Cooper Kupp fails. There's no opportunity cost, because in DFS, when we've been building salary cap lineups, the opportunity cost with Cooper Kupp is, oh, look, we have to pay $10,000 for this guy, or you got to play 10-5 on FanDuel, 9-7 on DK. That's been the only tripping point with Cooper Kupp is, do I want to spend that much salary, and where do I find the other value? We don't have to worry about that here. So to me, Cooper Kupp is the biggest no-brainer play on the slate. If I was building a bunch of lineups, Cooper Kupp is the player I would get the most exposure to. I think that's pretty sensible. Is that where you would stand on him as well?
For sure. And also with how unique this contest is, because it aggregates week in and week out, having a high floor helps you tread water, and treading water is really helpful. That's something that I noticed playing this throughout the season. Just having that high floor week in and week out will give you a potential to compete for that top prize come the Super Bowl. So another thing that was cool, I actually was fortunate and lucky enough to win one of these weeks. I actually ended up winning one of the weeks, and they sent me a Pat Mahomes jersey. So that's one thing that's pretty cool, is like if you win the week outright, you can pick a jersey of your choice, which is kind of cool. So that was it's somewhere in the house, but I'm not a big jersey guy, but it's nice to get a Pat Mahomes jersey when you can.
Big neon lights guy though, written back, which all the people watching at home, they love the setup. Let's get over to tight end, and we've got the top tight ends for fantasy on this slate as well. Gronk, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Darren Waller. I don't really think there's too much reason to consider anybody else, but which tight end do you view as the top overall option? And does that at all get influenced based on who you're playing at quarterback for a little bit more correlation with the stack?
It has to be Travis Kelce for me. Kelce, red zone looks are great for him. There could be easily a 3 touchdown Kelce game. He gets involved in that. They have that reward. They count it as a receiving touchdown when Pat Mahomes just shovels the pass to him. They have a lot of goal line packages in Kansas City built out for Travis Kelce. So that's always very interesting to see how that pans out. So Kelce for me, and then I'm going to have to actually, Darren Waller would be number 2 for me. I think Darren Waller should be healthy now. It's a great matchup against Cincinnati. Tight ends have done very well against Cincinnati throughout the season. I like going to Darren Waller for sure in this matchup for him. And I don't think he'll be that on just because people have forgotten about him. He's not been playing as much. So I think Darren Waller for sure is someone you can go to.
And it's safe to say there's no real reason for serious consideration for a tight end outside of Gronk, Kelce, Kittle, Waller. To me, it's those 4. And then I don't want to really be playing Dallas Goedert or Zach Ertz. Obviously, it's possible for one of those guys to have a big game, but it's so outside the realm of what's realistic compared to guys like Kelce, Waller, Kittle, Gronk that I just don't want to consider them. But if you're playing, I know because a lot of times you play a lot of lineups and things like this, do you think that you would be considering guys like Goddard, Ertz, or Higbee or anything?
Goddard, not necessarily Dallas Goedert. I just don't know. It's going to be interesting. Goddard in this matchup, I do expect them to be down, and then it's probably going to force Jalen Hurts to throw a lot. So with that being said, they're going to be very low on options, and all you need them is to outscore them this week, right? You need them to be the highest scoring. It can pan out. And at a certain point, it's tough to project what the field is going to do with such a new site and people obviously playing the high projected guys week in and week out. So there is some merit where Goddard can outscore him. And that's one way to get different. You can build a very chalky lineup. Let's see, you go Mahomes and the 2 Fournette and Mixon and Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp. And instead of playing Kelce, you just go to Goddard. That's all you get. That's one way to build differentiation and gives you the upside of potentially winning out the week and having that high scoring for that week. And then the next week you go back to the chalk because you already outperformed the chalk in week 1. You don't necessarily need to do that again the following week. So it's an interesting game theory aspect of that as well.
All right. Now here's how we're going to close the show. The flex play of the week. So Cooper Kupp is going to be the pretty obvious one. I think that both of us would say if you had to play any one player in the flex spot, it would be Cooper Kupp. So let's deviate a little bit and close the show like this. If you're playing somebody in the flex spot who is not Cooper Kupp this week, Ryan, who is it that you would be going with?
Ooh, the flex play of the week. If I'm not going to Cooper Kupp in the flex this week, if Leonard Fournette is all systems go, I'm going to Lenny Fournette. I do think if Lenny Fournette is all systems go, I expect a 3-down roll for him, and Lenny Fournette has played really well. And playoff Lenny's a thing. Playoff Lenny's a thing. And I'm all about that playoff Lenny. So he'll be my flex play of the week. I like the team total for Tampa. They're at home. Expect Lenny to be involved if he's all systems go. I'll give another one if Leonard Fournette is not ready to go. I do think targeting the upside in volume of Joe Mixon. I do think Mixon is a pretty solid play. I do think a lot of people are going to go to Burrow. So I do think that's one way to get leverage in the sense of going to Mixon if Burrow is going to be popular with the Burrow stack. So I think Joe Mixon would be in my second one.
All right. I love it. And I was going to pick Joe Mixon as well after you went with Fournette, but you already gave it away. So I'd say if I went with somebody else, maybe Jamar Chase. We're just looking for the most upside possible because Jamar Chase probably wasn't consistent this year. We're talking about a guy who's probably not going to be rostered that much in the flex and is legitimate upside for 200 plus receiving yards. We've seen that this year. So that is going to do it for us. That is our little intro here to FanUp. Hopefully doing more shows for them. Thank you guys very much for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And don't forget, if you're signing up at FanUp for the first time, use the promo code Awesemo. That's all capital letters, Awesemo. And you get $20 in free play money without putting anything down. So good way to get started in FanUp. Good luck this weekend, guys.